Order. Order. Elliot Colburn to move the motion.
Thank you, Mrs. Garney. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And I beg to move that this House has considered E-petition 601323, entitled Make Self-Employed People Eligible for Statutory Adoption Pay. The prayer of this petition states, and I quote, that ensuring statutory adoption pay is available to a self-employed parent in the same way that maternity allowance is available for self-employed new mums would promote an equal and fair society inclusive of all routes to parenthood. A parent taking statutory leave, regardless of it being adoption or maternity, should be both recognised and supported fairly. Expecting self-employed parents to take unpaid adoption leave while supporting their child during a critical transitional period is unfair. This current policy is not inclusive of adoptive families and to many reads as an act of discrimination. I wish the government to introduce an adoption allowance comparable with maternity allowance for the self-employed. Now, I'd like to thank the petition creator as well as the multiple campaigners, parents, charities and organisations, including many who are in the public gallery today, who have come forward to share their experiences of the adoption process, for reaching out to me and indeed to everyone taking part in this debate today to help us prepare for today's debate. And I'd also like to put on record my gratitude to the Petitions Committee clerks and the team behind the scenes for conducting an online survey to ask the petitioners about their experience of adopting a child. Now, as expected with a topic of this importance, there was a lot of passionate feedback from petitioners, which has really helped us better understand this policy, and I'm grateful for their assistance. This petition has amassed almost 15,000 signatures, including 37 from my own Carshalton and Wallington constituency. And on behalf of the Petitions Committee, I should just explain that whilst this petition hasn't reached the 100,000 signatures threshold that we would normally trigger a debate in this place, the Petitions Committee can, with its discretion, schedule debates of this nature. And I think this topic is a perfect example, Mrs. Garney, of where we might want to use that discretion, because it's an issue that not many people might come across directly. It might be a bit niche for some, but it's something that's very, very important, and therefore why we felt it was important to bring it here today. Now, the issue of financial support for self-employed adoptive parents was raised by the Petitions Committee in our October 2021 report entitled The Impact of COVID-19 on New Parents 1 Year On. This report expressed disappointment that the government had not acted to close the disparity in access to support between the employed and the self-employed adoptive parents when this disparity was first raised by the committee's report into the pandemic on new parents in July 2020. Our report also highlighted an apparent lack of departmental ownership of the issue within government, with confusion of whether or not this sits between BEIS or the Department for Work and Pensions. And ultimately, we concluded that the benefits available to self-employed birth parents should be extended to self-employed adoptive parents. And before we delve into the details, I just want to set out some context in which we come here to hold today's debate. There are around 1,870 children in England alone waiting to be adopted. And 52% of these, that's over half of these children, have been waiting longer than 18 months. Our country currently faces a shortage of adoptive parents who have the right skills and the background to meet the needs of these children waiting. Now, I do welcome last year's new national adoption strategy, and as part of the strategy, the government's vision was to ensure that all adoptive children are found permanent, loving homes as quickly as possible where they will be safe and secure. The strategy stated that from prospective adopters from every walk of life are to be warmly welcomed and supported in a system that is never threatening or judgmental. Unnecessary barriers and bureaucracy placed in the way of those seeking to adopt are to be removed systematically across the country. And children and families are to get the support they need when they need it. So in summary, our country faces an adoption problem, and the government is taking steps to ensure that appropriate prospective adopters are supported to adopt a child in need as per their strategy. Now, women in employment having a baby are, of course, usually entitled to statutory maternity pay, and for those not entitled, because they're self-employed, for example, there is the full back benefit of the maternity allowance. Employees who are adopting a child also are eligible for statutory adoption pay, which is modelled on statutory maternity pay. However, there is no equivalent for people who are adopting a child and who do not meet the qualifying conditions, aka if they are self-employed. And in the government's response to the committee, I will give way.
I thank my honourable member for giving way. He's making some very good points and pointing out the importance of this issue being addressed by the government. In that respect, will he reflect upon the fact that the government has proactively encouraged people to be self-employed over the last 10 to 12 years? We now have ever-increasing numbers of people who are self-employed or on on flexible contracts of that type that they would be considered self-employed. And would he not agree that it's all the more important, because of that encouragement the government's given towards self-employment, that this issue is looked at as a priority?
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention, and as ever, he is amazing in his psychic abilities to have seen further on in my contributions where I will make that very point. But he makes it even more eloquently than I will go on to. I think it's a very, very important point indeed. If I can go back to the government's response to our committee's report on this issue and to the petition, they restated that local authorities can already provide discretionary financial support to self-employed adoptive parents where affordability is a barrier to them taking time away from work. It is also noted that prospective adopters are entitled to an assessment of their family's needs, which could result in further offers of support, including discretionary, means-tested financial support, advice, information, counselling and support services. In response to this petition, as well as a written parliamentary question from the Honourable Member for York Outer, who is in her place, the government also stated that support for employed parents has been prioritised as they, I quote, do not generally have the same level of flexibility and autonomy over how and when they work as self-employed parents do. However, there are a number of concerns with this approach that need to be better understood and, in my view, rethought. Firstly, whilst local authorities should consider making payments equivalent to the maternity allowance to self-employed adopters, there is no legal requirement for them to do so. It's merely guidance. And this creates inconsistencies across the country because a particular problem for prospective adopters is that many search for an adoptive child through national agencies rather than local ones. And indeed, many local authorities are combining their adoption pathways. And I've also heard from multiple adoptive parents that this guidance is also unclear and confusing, including unhelpful signposting on the gov.uk website. And this isn't a surprise considering the issue of departmental responsibility, which I touched on briefly earlier. Secondly, and linked to the first concern, there are inconsistencies in funding, which therefore creates uncertainty for families hoping to adopt. Conversations with social workers and agency staff are limited to ifs, buts and maybes, and therefore financial planning becomes difficult, if not impossible. And there was agreement amongst the majority of respondents to the Petitions Committee survey that access to adoption support needs to be simplified, with multiple complaints about the role of local authorities. The very nature of the process of adoption is uncertain, of course, but to add further stress and uncertainty to this process may not be the best policy to ensure stability for the newly adopted child and their new family. Thirdly, the government's understanding of self-employment when it comes to adoption seems outdated and unrealistic in many cases. As part of my research for this debate, I heard from a prospective adopter who is self-employed. Unfortunately, this individual, like so many others, is unable to hit the pause button on their work whenever they feel like it and press play again when they're free. The individual in question works full-time, teaching in a school, and has the same amount of flexibility as an employed teacher. One of the key takeaways from the Petitions Committee survey on this issue found that adoptive parents felt they need more time away to bond with and care for their child than the average birth parent. And this is, of course, understandable because adopted children have often suffered trauma from years of neglect and loss. The survey found that just 61% of self-employed adopters were able to take time off work following adoption, compared to 78% of employed workers. Furthermore, 95% of self-employed adoptive parents agreed that more financial support would allow them to take time off that they needed to support their new child's adjustment to their new family and their new life. Contracts and work patterns have changed a lot in recent years, but adoption support has not reflected that. Self-employed adopters need the support to take leave from their work to put time into ensuring their new child is safe and settled. Fourthly, coming to this from a Conservative point of view, I feel the government should be supporting and encouraging entrepreneurialism rather than repelling people from it. There are currently 4.8 million people in the UK who are self-employed, making up to 15% of the workforce. Now, this is a 12% increase since 2001, and indeed, as my honourable friend said, we are doing much to encourage people to become self-employed. The self-employed are the business owners, they're the job creators, they're the wealth creators for our country, and they are the backbone of our economy. We need them. Therefore, as we look at this issue, and we have debated support for the self-employed many times. I've led debates in this place throughout the pandemic about support for the self-employed and business owners during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I, like many members in this House, have been contacted by dozens of constituents throughout the peak of the pandemic who were unable to receive substantial financial support, many of whom were self-employed. Finally, the government's position on support for the self-employed is not consistent with the aims of the National Adoption Strategy. One of the respondents who took part in the Petitions Committee survey on this explained how they had changed jobs shortly before adopting and, as a result, could not adopt a child for the first 6 months in their new post. Self-employed adopters are penalised and children are waiting longer in care. I absolutely support the aims of the government's National Adoption Strategy, which states that prospective adopters from every walk of life should be supported, including the self-employed. The vision is to ensure that all adoptive children are found permanent, loving families as quickly as possible, unless, of course, their prospective parent is self-employed, it seems. It is difficult to gauge the full extent of how many individuals, children and families are impacted by this disparity. Nevertheless, I do hope that this debate today will highlight the need to address this and pave a path that will ultimately unlock future adopters and support the creation of safe, loving and happy families. In my research for this debate, it sounded very much like this had been a loophole that no one had noticed before. Therefore, I seriously hope that the government does see that in the same way and will look to close it as soon as possible. I will draw my remarks to a close, as I know other members are eager to contribute, but I do look forward to hearing the Minister's comments, and I hope he's able to address those 5 concerns that I have raised, as well as no doubt the many more that will be raised for other members throughout the course of this afternoon's debate. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered E-petition 601323 relating to support for new adoptive parents. If people are wishing to contribute in a speech, they must stand at the appropriate times so we can recognise that they wish to speak fully. Thank you so much. I now call on Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Ms Garney. It's always a pleasure to see you in the chair, and I do thank the Petitions Committee as well for selecting this topic for the debate today, particularly in the number of signatures, because we know that everyone that would have petitioned would have either had personal experience or known of experience of what it is to be self-employed and to adopt and the challenges that that bring. Before I home in on the petition itself, I want to pay tribute to the families who provide safe, loving, forever families for children. As chair of the APPG on adoption and permanence, it's a privilege to engage with the whole community involved in adoption, from young people themselves and birth parents and adoptive parents, as well as health and social services, their professions around the child, and as Secretariat, Adoptions UK and Homes for Good. We strive to make the adoption journey one of the most supportive and safe journeys around the child, one that puts a young person very much at the centre, one that ensures that funding and services are there, and one that looks at good family making and good family building with secure foundations. We recognise that there are many challenges that can occur, and when we identify those barriers, we need services to respond and government to use its agility to fix the challenges.
Will my honourable friend give way?
I'm happy to give way.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. She's making a very important point about how we need to support adoptive families and adopted children going forward under the current issues we're facing as well. One rather niche issue, and one I've been campaigning on, is the regulation of sale of sperm online. Now, colleagues might be horrified to learn that this is widespread in Facebook groups and social media online, and it's causing children to seek alternative means of finding out where they've come from via ancestry DNA, for example, and it's causing a lot of problems. So would my honourable friend agree with me that when we look at the issue of adopted children, we need to look at all the services that support them and their families long term, especially in the online unregulated space?
I thank my honourable friend for raising this issue, and clearly she's probably more of an expert than me on this particular issue, but one thing that we have recognised is the role of digital and the fact that many children in an adoptive setting can often be traced or trace their birth parents without that whole support placed around them, and we've got to address the digital age in which children are growing up in order to keep them safe and to protect them. So I'm sure we'll talk some more about this particular subject. And I know also that the Children's Minister is committed to building stable families and providing the care and support that young people and their parents need. He has a sizable task. At this time, we know that over 80,000 children are in care. And I trust that with the imminent publication of the review by Josh McAllister, that he will simultaneously fix the gaps in the adoption journey. We welcome the commitment of the £144 million for the Adoption Support Fund and the £19.5 million for the implementation of the adoption strategy over the next 3 years. It is sound investment because we will see the return. We need the workforce plan to support children in the care system and their families. We know that there is a deficit in timely support for families as the scars of trauma emerge in their various expressions. 3/4 of children have experienced abuse or neglect prior to adoption, and therefore they need to have the support in place at the right time. From our APPG's inquiry Strengthening Families report published just last year, we identified the importance of matching, of aiding parents in the process. It has been ever more challenging through the pandemic, but we cannot let a recovery period delay the process of family building. We are particularly concerned about black and minoritised children in the care system, older children and young people in care the longest. As an APPG, we have more work to do, but so does the government. For self-employed parents, they need help too. Firstly, the crucial period of bonding as a family forms is vital in forming attachments and a new rhythm in a child's life. The self-employed need the same opportunity as other parents to dedicate time to this. Denying statutory adoption pay is nonsensical, and I trust the Minister agrees. We await the legislation response to the Taylor Review, and I ask that the Minister ensures that the voice of adoptive parents is not lost in that process. The Honourable Member for Basingstoke has made a powerful plea for other parental rights to emerge in this bill, and today I ask that adoptive parents do not receive any detriment either. If, as a society, we value parenting and recognise its importance, there is no excuse for exclusion. However, I hope the Minister will forgive me, but I'm impatient. Self-employed parents need support now. We know how hard self-employed people work to make their businesses a success. And we heard from the member earlier about their challenges through the pandemic and how hard people worked in order to make their businesses thrive. They can't just juggle work around bonding with their child. It is a full-time task ensuring that the right attachments are made, and that's why we need to ensure that they get the financial underpinning so they don't have to worry about paying their bills, not least at a time of cost of living being such a challenge to all families. They should not have to go cap in hand either to their local authority. Special guardians, kinship carers and adoptive parents need recognition that they, probably even more than birth parents, need to be 100% focused on family building. It is time for government to carry out even a consultation prior to its promised employment bill, looking at the Taylor Review. And I asked the Minister today to commit to a consultation on this very subject of the debate. The statutory guidance on adoption 2013, paragraph 9.38 states the local authority should consider making a payment of financial support equivalent to the maternity allowance to adoptive parents who are ineligible to receive statutory adoption pay. But why is it that adoptive parents continually have to chase everything and dedicate their time to feeding into the bureaucracy and to get it to work for them, as opposed to government addressing this issue? Statutory pay will aid the recruitment of potential adoptions and assist in the success and stability of others. We know that 3,000 children are in need of a family. A full consultation was committed by the Base Minister for parental pay and leave during the evidence given to the Petitions Committee in 2020, but we've got to include adoption pay within that. Government have committed to improve adoption, so this is yet another opportunity for government to do so, and I hope this consultation will therefore be inclusive. The Base Minister, the member for Sutton and Sheen, has stated it is crucial to the success of an adoption placement that an adopter takes time off work to care for and bond with their child. This must apply to the self-employed as much as the employed. There is no difference in the eyes of that child and the needs of that child. Government... I'm happy to give way.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. He's making some very, some points that I'm sure the Minister will find difficult to disagree with. Just on the point, on the issue that she raises quite rightly of the barriers there have been to adoption more generally, the coalition government did a lot with the now member for Edisbury, as he is, but in a previous guise, to reduce some of those barriers. But he also highlighted the failure previously of government to have joined up thinking, so to joined up the fiscal and financial incentives to support people in adoption. So I hope that the one take-home message we have from the debate today for the Minister is that it's time to do that, and I hope that he will be able to commit to doing that at the dispatch box, and I hope that she would agree with that.
I really do thank the honourable member for his intervention. He's absolutely right. And normally it is the parent which is doing the joining up, and that clearly can't be right. It needs to ensure that a whole adoption strategy looks at every aspect of an adoptive parent's journey and ensures that the facilities and the support and the services are in place to give the child the best start in life possible. And it is often exhausted parents who find themselves having to negotiate, and this is where the law stands at the moment, having to negotiate with a local authority to see if they fit any criteria, of which there are no guidance around, and we know cashed-out local authorities may not be minded to pay specific attention to what is a very small cohort of parents that we're talking about here. So government must recognise, as it does with statutory maternity entitlements, how necessary they are for parents to bond with their child, and how much more important it is for a child that has experienced multiple forms of trauma in their life and where there could be complex needs that need addressing. Life is often exhausting as an adoptive parent, trying to form a new family, working with a child, giving that child the safest home possible, whilst also ensuring that those services are there in a timely way to support that child, to nurture them, to ensure that they have the best start in life, in the fact that perhaps the first start wasn't in the right place. The Good Work Review does not accept that there should be differentiation in the support received. For the sake of statutory adoption pay for the self-employed, we're not talking about a lot of people. This is not talking about a lot of cost to government in the scale of things. But I would say this to the Minister, the scale of savings the government will make by ensuring that self-employed parents have the support around them will be immeasurable for parents and immeasurable for the child. Yeah, yeah. So now is the time to act, and I trust that the Minister will agree.
I just want to check, Mr. Jones, you're right at Tadley. You're wishing to contribute find the time to accommodate you.
That's kind, but I assumed I wouldn't be called, so I'm here just to listen.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Holly Mummy-Croft.
Thank you, Ms Garnier. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship today. And I'd like to thank my honourable member, I'd like to thank my honourable friend, the member for Carshalton and Wallington, for his speech and in opening the debate. He made an absolutely cracking speech. And I have to say I agree with pretty much everything he said. And I want to join him in thanking the Petitions Committee for their work on this issue, and of course the families who have contributed to this discussion and to this petition. Their work is incredibly important in this. Adoption is something that is very close to my heart, and unlike many people across this country, it's something that my own family understand well. Whether adoption is part of how your family was made or not, I think we all have an instinctive understanding of the value that adoption plays in our society, and it is important to many of my constituents. Before this debate, I was contacted by many people in the Scunthorpe constituency, some who have adopted children, some who have not, and it is an incredibly important issue. And I want to thank all of those people who did take the time to raise this with me and to share their experiences and their views on this. And I know that there are constituents of mine here today in the gallery, and I thank them for taking the time to do that. I personally was surprised to learn that parents who are self-employed whilst adopting are not able to access statutory adoption pay. All of us know, and all of the petitioners know, parents who are employed and are adopting are able to access adoption leave. This is a fantastic system that provides the same access and rights as maternity leave and puts adoption on exactly the same footing as other ways of building your family, and that's exactly as it should be. And it's right that the government supports parents who adopt. The benefits to taking that leave are huge. It gives time for the new families to settle in and to bond, as we've heard today. And especially for newborns, the benefits developmentally to families being able to take that time off are absolutely invaluable. And I was quite shocked when I started to look into this issue after it was brought to my attention, because it seemed like the most obvious thing in the world. Why wouldn't people who are self-employed be able to access statutory adoption pay? The above benefits to the new families that I've just described are reason enough on their own to extend this. And as the petitioners have asked, I absolutely support them in their desire to see this extended. But beyond that, we should be helping prospective parents to adopt, and we should be making it as easy as possible for the right people to do this, irregardless of their financial situation. There are currently, as my honourable friend mentioned, 1,870 children in England who are waiting to meet their family. Over half of these children have been waiting for longer than 18 months, and we do have a shortage of adoptive parents. Not having access to statutory adoption pay is a potential barrier to self-employed future parents. Without it, people are facing a considerably long time away from work. If they're the only person driving their business, this is a massive financial hit that not all families are able to absorb on their own. And I worry that any self-employed person who wants to adopt may not be able to do this simply because they cannot afford to take that time away from work. And if that's one person, it's one too many. I'm not under the illusion that lifting this barrier will mean that every single child that needs a family will get one. But making adoption a viable option for more self-employed people will help some of the children who are waiting to find their family, and this should be our priority. It ultimately boils down to fairness. We should be providing the exact same support to all adoptive parents, regardless of their employment status. I know when I raised this with the government before that this situation was not intentional. The system was not actively designed to favour one set of parents over another. This is an anomaly, and I welcome the commitment to review this situation in the workplace. Similarly, I know that there are some local authorities, as we've heard today, that are able to make discretionary payments of support to adoptive parents. We have a very good local authority in North Lincolnshire, but parents should be sure they will get the same support regardless of where they live, whether it's Scunthorpe or Southport. And I want to highlight as well, there are many families, and I think this is an incredibly important issue that we really must keep in our minds. There are many families who aren't able to be publicly visible and to fight on this issue. And we understand the reasons for this difficulty. But that makes it even more important that we do all we can in this place to give a voice to those, through no fault of their own, who are not able to shout as loud as they would like to for their families. And I spoke to a woman in my constituency just a couple of weeks ago, mum to a gorgeous little boy, who made this point to me, and I'm very, very mindful of her words as I speak today. Support that is provided to one parent must be made available to another. There should be no anomaly as regards how the person became a parent. In the reply that I received from government on this, I was told they are fully aware of this issue and are considering what options are available for equalising rights and entitlements given to adoptive parents, and I'm very encouraged by this. I hope the Minister will commit to looking again at this issue and considering how we can extend statutory adoption pay to all eligible families that adopt a child, and show that it stands behind families and is committed to helping our children who sometimes have had a very difficult start in life. I hope that my right honourable friend will strongly consider the requests in the petition and the strength of feeling on this, and the support that I believe will be forthcoming in all of our communities for this. Thank you.
Bill Estestone.
Well, thank you very much, Ms Garney. I'm delighted to be here, and members will realise why shortly. I really do congratulate the member for Colchester in the speech and the presentation he gave and the case he made. I hope we get a very similar speech from the Minister in a moment or two, who accepts everything that he said, because I didn't find anything I disagreed with. I agreed with his honourable member from his honourable friend from Scunthorpe, and my honourable friend from the City of York, as always, made an impassioned case in support of adopters. Now, she knows, if others don't, why this is something to me. And I'll just say to the honourable member from Colchester, it's a very much, it's not just the Conservatives who think we should be supporting our self-employed people. That's very much what the Labour Party thinks too. Yeah. And I speak from personal experience, because I was self-employed and started and grew small businesses for many years.
I don't wish to stop your flow, but I think you're getting the constituency name wrong. It
I
is
am sorry.
Carshilton and Wallington.
Okay.
For the record, Carshilton and Wallington. Is that correct, Mr. Elliot Colburn?
I do apologise to the honourable,
for the record, just for the record,
of Carshilton and Wallington for moving them to Essex. That's going to get me in a whole heap of trouble. I mean, I'll get into trouble at home for that as well, because not only was I self-employed, but I adopted with my wife 2 children in 2007 whilst we were growing our businesses. So I completely understand why this is such a crucial issue for so many people, and I completely support the case from personal experience. The link to Essex is my children were from Essex and born in Southend, so I am now in deep trouble for having had to place that slight on them. But Ms Garney, we found it incredibly difficult to build relationships with children when we adopted them, which is a very common experience. And we've had the descriptions of the challenges of children who have been neglected, who face trauma, who just, even if it is, I say even, including if it is the trauma of having been removed from their birth parents. And that trauma can be there in the youngest of children, not just amongst older children who have conscious memories. And I would also say that, as well as giving chance for parents and children to bond, there is also a huge need, as those of us who've done it appreciate much later on, I think, for us as adoptive parents to learn from experience and to learn with support, preferably, what is required in looking after children who have really significant additional needs. Sometimes those needs come out much later, by the way, when children are older. And so the very least we can do is making sure that we reflect the same needs as parents who are giving birth to their own children and of the current arrangements for adoptive leave for people who are employed. This does seem to be an oversight, it does seem to be an inconsistency, and I hope that the Minister is going to address it. We've heard of the situation where a self-employed birth parent has the right to paid adoption leave, something introduced, I'm very pleased to say, by a Labour government nearly 20 years ago. And the rationale was it gave time to adjust to the new relationships, and because of the importance of reducing the number of disrupted placements. We've heard from a number of honourable members that over 80,000 children are in care at the moment, a record high number, very sadly. And anything that we can do to get permanence for those children must be to their benefit and to the benefit of society as a whole. And we saw from the, and I think the figures both from a combination of Home for Good and the FSB, that the FSB estimate £5 million would fund self-employed adoption leave a year, and Home for Good put a figure of £34,000 a year for each child in care. It doesn't need very many more of those children to be in a position where self-employed prospective adopters can adopt them to make a financial saving for the Exchequer. So the numbers do work, as well as the case being absolutely clear-cut that this is the right thing to do for children. And as the honourable member from Carshalton and Wellington correctly said, it is something that should be available to people who are self-employed as well. This was because I got his constituency wrong, because I was thinking about the children's minister who's spoken on this previously. But Ms Ghani, I do hope that we are going to make some progress, that we do have a good response from the Minister here, because ultimately this must be right for adopters, it must be right for entrepreneurs, and it must be right for the Exchequer. But above all, this must be right in giving a better chance for children and for families. Self-employed people, sadly, far too often were excluded during COVID. For far too many of them, they're excluded from the opportunity to make a difference to children's lives through adoption. So come on, Minister, let's include the self-employed and change lives for the better.
Thank you. I now call on the Minister, Mr Lee Rowley.
Thank you, Ms Ghani. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to contribute to the debate today. I'm very grateful for the contributions of all of my colleagues from Carshalton and Wallington, from York Central, from Central Suffolk and North Ipswich, who's no longer in this place, from Pontypridd, Scunthorpe and Sefton Central. This is a genuinely incredibly important debate, and one which should be taken with the seriousness which colleagues have shown this evening, and with the importance that those in the gallery clearly have to this. And if I may, for a moment, Ms Ghani, if you will allow me to, I just want to pay tribute, in the same way that many other people have done so here already, to the incredible work that adoptive parents do every single day. I am utterly and completely in awe of those people who take on those responsibilities, and that responsibility which is taken on for a lifetime. And it is incredible to see the willingness of people to do that, and to support young people and vulnerable young people who are in very difficult circumstances, and to ensure that they build a better life. I have never spoken about it in this chamber, but it is something that we have looked at, that I have looked at on a personal level. I have not done it. I have not taken the springboard that some of those in the gallery and elsewhere have done. It's very trepidatious, it's very challenging to do that. Working it through is something which we are still doing, but it is something which I have looked at. I know how difficult it can be, and I know how much it impacts on people's lives, and we are immensely grateful for all of the work that adoptive parents up and down the country, whether in my constituency or any others that are represented here today, do on a daily basis. We also recognise that to go out and to be willing to set up their own business, to be an entrepreneur, to think about how to support individuals and how to go out and undertake private enterprise is also a big endeavour. It's also another leap in the dark. It's also another thing which takes time to get people to do. And we want to be supportive of those people who are self-employed. We want to be supportive of those people who want to set up their own businesses, who have the desire to go out there and to try and innovate. And so these are two very, very important areas of policy. And it is important that as government we think through the potential implications of it and the challenges which have rightly been highlighted through this petition and through those who have put it forward for us today. I do also just want to say, before I come to the substantive point, I just want to say one other thing, if I may. I think the person who wrote the petition is in the audience. And I was reading on their blog earlier today as part of preparation for this. And I was reading one of the things which they had put in December when they were talking about why they had put this petition forward, the importance of it for them, and why it was so important for them for Parliament to be considered. And at the time, the person was talking about how they got up to 4,000 signatures, and obviously it went much higher than that. And they said in their blog, we want to have our voices heard. We want to be visible, to be accepted, to be recognised and supported. In a nutshell, we want rights, and I don't think we're asking for all that much. And although I know next to nothing about politics, I've managed to work out an E-petition and gone from there. And I just want to say to that person who may be in the room, I can't speak for my colleagues, but I think most of us here, we didn't come from political backgrounds either. I certainly didn't. My dad was a self-employed milkman, as it happened, so I didn't expect to be here either. So this place is often something which is very difficult for people who have got no experience in it, like most of us never had before we came here at whatever point, to understand, to work out. We have weird, very strange approaches to things. We say things which we would never say down the pub. But ultimately, most of us are actually quite normal people. Not properly normal people, we're in politics, but we're not that far off. And ultimately, we do understand these challenges. And we do recognise that there are issues out there, and we do know that there are parts of our broad legislative canon which sometimes are challenging, which sometimes don't make immediate sense, which sometimes are in tension with each other. And I hope, if nothing else from coming today, you will recognise that, and I hope you feel that you have been heard. Of course, and I apologise in advance for saying you.
Then it's noted. Minister, you may continue.
Thank you. I am grateful for you pulling me up on the point that I am not able to do so. But moving on to the substantive point, as honourable members will note, the government has provided a response to the petition. It's on the website, and I know that those honourable members and those who have taken interest in this issue will have seen that. And I know that there will still be, no doubt, a continuing conversation and a continuing push towards government on that. But I want to just spend a few minutes, if I may, explaining some of the reasons behind that. And I know there will be people in this room, both sat within the chamber and then watching the chamber, who take different views. But I hope, at the very least, I am able to explain the rationale for why we are here. The government always should listen. It should always think through these things in detail. It should always try and understand the tensions between different policies. But I do want to take a few moments just to outline this. The government's overall package of support for adopters, we want to support all adopters, including new adopted parents, to ensure that they can access the support their children and their family need at the early stages of an adoption. And as has been referenced by a number of colleagues or a number of honourable members already, in July 2021 we published our National Adoption Strategy, which highlights the key improvements we expect to see in the adoption system as we go forward. There is an incredible amount in there. There is an incredible amount of ambition in there. I think it will take time to get there, but that is the direction that the government wants to go from my colleagues in the Department for Education. And that strategy sets out commitments to improve services in three main areas. Recruitment of sufficient adopters, which has been highlighted by a number of honourable members already, about the importance of ensuring that those children who need adoptive parents can be matched with them, matching of those approved adopters with children waiting, and then support provided to adopted children and their families, which is exactly what we are talking about today. And then earlier this month, we also announced that the Adoption Support Fund will continue to offer important support to adoptive and eligible special guardianship order families up to March 2025, up to the end of the spending review period that we're in at the moment, through providing access to therapeutic services. When that was launched, and it was launched back in 2015, it was a unique programme which provided funding to local authorities and to regional adoption agencies so that they could access a range of support for families and tailor that support for families, such as psychotherapy, family, creative therapies, following a review of locally assessed needs. And supporting and ensuring permanency for children is a priority. And I hope that since 2015, it has been demonstrated that through things like the Support Fund, we've been able to offer support to nearly 40,000 children. And the additional funding, which has just been announced, will take that to 10 consecutive years of funding. It's 144 million over the period from next month to March 2025, and I hope it demonstrates that the government is committed to enabling and stabilising those placements and recognises the important role that government needs to play in that approach. I think today's debate has been a very reasonable one and a very important one, and I think the level of cross-party support, the level of interest, the level of gentle pushing, quite rightly, of the government on important issues like this demonstrates the willingness of members across all parties to take this issue seriously and also to move it outside of the normal bounds of party political knockabout, which we often fall into in this place. I hope equally it is recognised by honourable members and those in the gallery that there has been progress in recent years in terms of trying to bring a better level playing field around adoption and making those processes easier and simpler, although there is still much to go in the future. In terms of the specifics around maternity allowance, there are two types of maternity pay available to pregnant working women and new mothers, as I no doubt colleagues and will know, statutory maternity pay and then maternity allowance. And both of those are primarily, historically, health and safety provisions which were related specifically to people being in the workforce at the time, but needing safety and support for pregnancy prior to giving birth, for childbirth itself, and for breastfeeding. The challenge here, and I recognise it as an area in tension, I recognise and understand the very clear arguments that have been made from all sides of the chamber today, is that because that support is based on that original principle, the challenge is in recognising that how we apply that here. I am not saying, and I wouldn't dare to say, that there aren't different challenges. The Honourable Member for Sefton Central highlighted very well the different challenges at different times which adopted parents need to go through. But the principle of the benefit which is seeking to be equalised does start from a different proposition and a different perspective. And it's why at this time the government is not coming forward with the change that is being proposed. I would be delighted to give way.
I'm really grateful to the Minister giving way, and he is right to say there are different circumstances clearly around an adoptive family than that of a birth family. However, the fact that there are different circumstances does mean that the government should look at those circumstances specifically. And my ask today is if the government would go away and consult on that to have a better understanding as to why these measures are just so important.
I'm really grateful for the comments from the Honourable Member for York Central, and she makes an important point. I'm not in a position right now to talk about the level of any future consultation that we will take. I know that this is an area where the government is always keen to get views, and I know that my colleagues both within the Department for Business and then across government elsewhere in education will continue to look at this, continue to take views from both honourable members and colleagues inside the House and then outside the House, and from those who have strong views on it. And I understand and acknowledge the point that she has made. I do want to turn, if I may, just to a few points which have been made in the chamber today. My honourable friend from Carshalton and Wallington, who introduced the debate so well, he highlighted a number of issues which he was keen to put forward. He highlighted some challenges around guidance and the clarity on those, and I'm happy to confirm I will take those away, and I'd be keen to speak to the Honourable Member in more detail about those so I can pass them on to my colleagues to see whether there is anything that may be possible there. The Honourable Member for Carshalton and Wallington also talked about variation around the country. There is this inherent tension, as I know he knows, and as Honourable Members know about this, about where and how we structure policies and where and how we put national requirements in at the centre versus local discretion. And one of the answers to the question which we are debating today is that there is, as has been outlined by the Honourable Member for York Outer, York Central, although I accept her challenge on it, there is a a recommendation, an indication that local authorities should be able to, where necessary, look to provide funding on a discretionary basis where it is necessary and where it is proportionate to do so. And I hope, whilst I do understand the point that the Honourable Member from York is highlighting about the challenge of going through that process, and often those processes can be challenging, it is there, and I hope it is used, and those people who are watching out there today who are thinking about this and maybe self-employed do recognise and contact their council should that be something which they feel would be beneficial. The Honourable Lady from Pontypridd talked about a very specific area of this policy. I'm happy to take that back. I'm afraid I don't have an answer for her today, but given the importance of it and given the profundity of it underneath, I think it is something which merits being given back to my colleagues, and I hope they will take the points that she has taken seriously. And my honourable friend from Scunthorpe highlighted the challenges and opportunities of self-employment, as well as articulating very clearly her support for this change. That is something which I, on a personal level, also understand. I think I mentioned a few minutes ago, my dad was self-employed. He was a milkman for 30 years, and and one of the reasons why he was doing that was to look after me and my brother when we came home. You know, it wasn't that common in the 80s for dads to make the tea and clean the house and things like that, but he did it. And that is a demonstration of how self-employed people try and keep all of these balls in the air, try and juggle things, try and make it work. And I do understand and accept the reason why we are debating this today and the importance of it to a group of people within that community. And then the Honourable Gentleman from Sefton Central makes his characteristic very direct appeal to the government on this and a range of other issues. But I'm grateful for him sharing his personal experiences and can completely understand why this is so important to him on a personal level, and I respect and I'm grateful for those experiences being shared in public. So I'd be delighted to give way to my honourable friend from Bristol.
I thank the Minister for giving way, and thank you, Ms Garney, for letting me intervene, given I couldn't be here at the start of the debate this evening. On the one hand, I've heard the Minister say that personally he agrees with what everyone in the Chamber has said today, and on the other hand, what I think I've interpreted is that the government hasn't given him the authority to say that he's going to do anything about it. And I just wonder, therefore, whether this is a question of policy or money. And if it's a question of money, has the department quantified how much it would cost to extend these benefits to the people in question? And if so, who would be paying for it? Is it an issue for the Treasury or is it an issue for his department?
I'm grateful to the Honourable Gentleman from Bristol North West for his characteristically incisive intervention. I think my answer on that is that we continue to look at all different elements about how we can structure support for new parents, whether they be birth parents or whether they be adoptive parents, not that that should matter in any way, shape or form, and try to work through the most appropriate interventions as possible. There will be opportunities later in the Parliament to look at this again. I am keen for people to continue to highlight the challenges and the personal situations that they are in. I hope I have articulated in the speech so far, in my contribution so far, the challenge of working through every single element of how different policies brought in for very good reasons at different times are in tension, but also the fundamental point here, which is that this particular benefit, which is seeking to be extended within this particular petition, was ultimately brought forward for a different purpose than what is being talked about here, whilst that doesn't take away from any of the important points which are being made both by honourable colleagues and the petitioners at large. I want to draw to a close, if I may. I'd be delighted to give way.
He's made this point about the reason, and I do accept his point about the reason why, for health reasons, benefits for parental leave and maternity benefits were decided upon both for employment and for self-employment. But the principle seems to have been established for employment amongst adoptive parents too. So that principle has already been established for employment. What I haven't followed from his argument, I waited to the end to ask him to see if he fleshed it out. What I haven't seen yet is what the rationale is for saying it hasn't also been established for self-employment for adoptive parents too.
Minister.
Grateful for the intervention from the Honourable Gentleman from Sefton Central. I think that the principle here is that whilst we recognise that the world of work changes, and whilst the Honourable Lady from York highlighted the moving parts around the Taylor Review and other things around how work is changing, there is a difference between employed work and self-employed work. And whilst the cohort of self-employed who we want to support and grow and help is very diverse, there are groups within there who do have additional flexibilities as a result of self-employment. They do have the ability to work around their personal lives in terms of their work issues and all that. And we also accept there's a group that don't. So it is a question of recognising that as a very diverse group, and one of the reasons why there is a recommendation, there is advice to local authorities about being able to support where there are specific circumstances or give consideration of support for specific circumstances, to try to acknowledge the diversity within that group and to try and make sure that there is support where people need it, but also a recognition that that is a diverse group where there is different groups and different people with different needs. In terms of the overall position then, I recognise that there are strong feelings here. I recognise that there are very significant views both within the gallery and within this room today, within the chamber today, on this particular issue. If just allow me one moment, and I will happily give way. I hope I have been able to articulate, whilst there are a number of people in this place who will remain issues at odds with it, the rationale for why the government is approaching in the way it has, why the policy is in place that it is. It comes originally from a different prospectus, a different proposition, and we do think there is some flexibility in the system to be able to support those who need it at the same time. I'll give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
Mr Darren Jones.
I'm very grateful to the Minister for giving way for a second time and indulging me. I'm just conscious that for members of the public gallery, they may wish to know what might happen after this debate today. And earlier in his closing remarks, the Minister said there would be a further opportunity to push this issue in this Parliament. I just wonder if I could probe him to give a bit more detail about that comment. Are we expecting, for example, a bill in the Queen's speech, perhaps an employment rights bill, where we might be able to see amendments or suggestions on this issue, or did he have something else in mind?
For the request for clarification, because my point there was about the general parliamentary process and the general opportunity for people to continue to campaign, to continue to make their voices heard and to continue to highlight things. I can't give any commitments on behalf of the government in terms of what it will or won't do other than what I've already done. This evening, which is at this stage, we believe that the government, and at this place, we believe that the position is as outlined and is outlined in the petition response. If I may just make a couple more sentences, then I'll be happy to do so. I do just want to draw to a conclusion before going back to the Honourable Lady from York. We do recognise this is an important area of policy. We do understand the challenge. We do understand why the petition has been brought forward. I hope I've been able to articulate today the reason why the policy is the policy. I hope I've been able to outline some of the discretion within the system which hopefully covers or has the potential to cover those people who have concerns about this. I do understand the challenge around that. I'm sure the Honourable Lady from York is about to tell me it for a final time, but if I give way to allow her to give way.
Rachel Maskell.
I'm very grateful. I'm just seeking another commitment from the Minister, if he would meet with the Children's Minister to discuss this issue further, not least in the light that the Government have committed to respond to the Taylor Review in legislation. And I would have thought that would be a great opportunity to take this issue further and ensure that we have got the support in place for self-employed adoptive parents. Minister.
I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady. I'm very happy to give the commitment that I will meet with the Children's Minister, that I will pass back the strength of feeling in the Chamber today. I hope the Honourable Lady recognises the position which I have outlined, and the position is the one which aligns with the petition response, which is the rationale for why the policy is the policy, the reason why we think there is discretion in place, and the hope on that basis that it covers sufficient scenarios, sufficient individuals, sufficient challenges, that is a reasonable and proportionate place to be. But before I conclude, I just want to say thank you again to the petitioners and to all those who have a very significant interest in this issue. Thank you to our colleagues and honourable members for their willingness to debate it in such a serious and proportionate manner. And the government is grateful for people continuing to raise these issues, even if at this time we do think that the current situation and the current discretion that's available should cover most of the issues, most of the challenges which we see in this particular policy.
Thank you. Mr Elliot Colburn, would you like to wind up?
Thank you, Mrs Gunning. I promise I won't take the remaining half an hour to wind up the debate. But could I also just thank all honourable and right honourable members for taking part in this important debate this evening, and indeed reiterate my thanks to the petitioners, not only from Carshalton and Wallington, but from around the country, and those who have made the journey to the public gallery today to watch this. But most importantly, thank those who do one of the most selfless things anyone can do, in my opinion, which is adopt a child in need. And I will forgive the Shadow Minister for mispronouncing my constituency, given that he is one of those. But I do hope that this is an issue where the government will commit to go away and look again. I was pleased to hear that there will be further opportunities throughout this Parliament to revisit this, and I seriously hope that it will be given the due attention that it deserves, because I too, as the member for Scunthorpe articulated so well, was surprised when I learned that this was the case. I thought, surely this can't be right. This seems like a weird anomaly to me. And I don't believe that the policy has got to this place intentionally. It just sounds like an anomaly that has been created through legislation that has gone through, and no one saw the glaring gap until we reached this point. So I do hope that there will indeed be that chance to look at this again and hopefully close that loophole, because I really don't believe the cost of the exchequer would be very much, but the return on that investment in children, I'm sure, will be huge and well worth the investment. So I hope that we can all bear in mind that ultimately this is about those vulnerable, often children, who need long-term loving families, and I hope that we can get the bureaucracy out of the way to give them just that. On that basis, Mrs Garney, I beg to move the motion.
The question is that this House has considered E-petition 601323 relating to support for new adoptive parents. As many as that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting stands adjourned.
The proceeding has ended.